the Pentagon, a building so monumental, so intertwined with the United States military might that it has become a symbol of unwavering power. But within the very walls of this imposing fortress, where the fate of entire nations is decided, there are stories. Stories that defy logic. Stories that shouldn't exist in a place built to protect secrets. For decades, whispers have circulated among those who work in the Pentagon late at night, during the quiet hours when only the hum of machinery and the occasional shuffle of guards' footsteps break the silence. Strange occurrences, unexplained shadows that linger in the corners of rooms. A chill in the air that never quite disappears, no matter how much the heat is turned up. And then there's the most unsettling of all, footsteps, heard echoing in empty hallways, footsteps that match the rhythm of your own, but when you turn to look, there is no one there. The building's history is steeped in secrecy, classified documents, covert military operations, and the execution of policies that have shaped the world. But could there be something else hidden within its walls? Could it be that beneath the surface of this powerful symbol of national security, there lurks something far beyond human understanding? Something that cannot be explained away by mere coincidence or the overactive minds of those who work here? The truth may be more terrifying than anyone is willing to admit. These unsettling stories have circulated for decades, but the first credible reports of paranormal activity didn't surface until the early 1950s. Security guards, tasked with watching over one of the most secure buildings in the world, began to report hearing strange sounds during their late-night patrols. It started subtly, just whispers, faint at first, then growing louder. Footsteps, echoing in the vast corridors. But when they turned to face whatever was behind them, there was nothing. Just an empty hall, stretching out into the dark. The first guard to speak up was John, a young man assigned to work the late shift in the early 1950s. His task was simple: patrol the halls, check the rooms, and ensure everything was in order. At first it seemed like a normal job, the kind of routine work every guard would expect. But things quickly took a turn for the strange. One night, John was walking down the longest corridor in the Pentagon, a passage that stretched endlessly in both directions. The walls, lined with dark wooden panels and silent doors, gave off an air of oppression, almost as if the building itself was holding its breath. As John walked, his footsteps echoed around him, loud in the otherwise silent hall. But then there was another set of footsteps. At first, he thought it was just the sound of his own steps bouncing off the walls. But the second set of steps was perfectly synchronized with his own, as if someone was walking right behind him. John stopped dead in his tracks, his heart racing. He turned around quickly, his flashlight sweeping the hallway behind him. There was no one. The hallway was empty, but the footsteps, they didn't stop. They kept pace with him, step for step, as though they were following him in perfect unison. It wasn't just an echo. It was real, and it was right behind him. John's pulse quickened, a cold sweat forming on his brow. He stood frozen in place, trying to convince himself that it was nothing. Maybe the building's vastness had played tricks on him. Maybe he was hearing things. But as he took a few more steps forward, the sound of footsteps continued, closer now, as if someone was right behind him. He could feel a chill in the air, even though the hallways were heated. Unable to take it any longer, John turned abruptly and ran down the corridor, desperate to escape whatever was following him. He reached the nearest exit and burst through the door, his heart pounding in his chest. The footsteps stopped the moment he reached the door, as though whatever had been pursuing him had given up. But the air outside felt cold, colder than it should have been for such a warm night. John's body trembled with the aftershock of his experience, and as he caught his breath, he couldn't shake the feeling that something unseen, was still watching him. When John recounted his experience to his fellow guards, their reactions were unsettling. They didn't laugh. They didn't mock him. Instead, they nodded solemnly, acknowledging that they too had heard strange things, footsteps, whispers, shadows in the corners of their vision. But no one dared speak more openly about it. It was as if the building itself demanded silence. John wasn't the only one. More guards came forward over the years, reporting similar experiences. Some saw shadowy figures at the end of hallways. Others felt cold, unnatural drafts in rooms that should have been airtight. Some guards swore that the voices called their names, beckoning them toward the unknown. As these reports continued to mount, the question grew louder. What was really going on inside the Pentagon? Could it be that the building, built upon decades of war, power, and secrecy, had somehow become a conduit for something far more terrifying? Something that could not be explained by the human mind? Was it the ghosts of soldiers, long dead, or something older? Something connected to the very land the Pentagon was built on? Coming up next, we'll hear more from those who walked these haunted halls and explore the theories that attempt to explain the unexplainable. Stay with us as we continue to peel back the layers of the Pentagon's dark past and its terrifying present. Months passed since John's chilling experience, but for the guards working the night shifts, the unnerving reports didn't stop. Another guard, Marcus, was assigned to patrol the same section of the Pentagon where John had felt the weight of something unseen. Marcus had heard the rumors, the whispers, the footsteps, the shadows, but like many others, he believed them to be just stories, fabrications born from overactive imaginations. But that would soon change. One evening, late into his shift, Marcus walked through the Pentagon's narrow corridors, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The lights flickered occasionally, casting eerie shadows that stretched unnaturally along the walls. Marcus brushed it off. Just an old building, he thought. He'd seen it all before. But as he passed the large, secure storage areas, something felt different. The air seemed colder, the atmosphere thicker, as though the building itself was holding its breath. At first, it was just a faint sound, a whisper. He couldn't make out the words, but it was unmistakably there. It echoed off the walls, like voices bouncing through the empty hallways. Marcus stopped and turned, trying to identify the source of the sound. The hallway was empty, just the silence. But the sound came again, closer this time, as though someone or something was standing right behind him, whispering in a language that felt foreign, ancient. As the whispers faded, Marcus felt a coldness in the air, a cold that didn't belong. It wasn't just the temperature, it was something far deeper, something that settled into his bones. A feeling of dread that washed over him, a sense of being watched, as though unseen eyes were studying him from the shadows. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe the air conditioning had kicked in, or perhaps it was just the isolation of being in such a vast, empty building. But then the growls started. The sound was low, almost animalistic, a growl that vibrated in the pit of his stomach. It came from somewhere deep within the building, echoing through the concrete, reverberating like it was part of the very structure. Marcus froze, his pulse quickening, his hand gripping the flashlight so tightly his knuckles turned white. He turned slowly, scanning the darkness around him, his breath visible in the air. But again, the corridor was empty. Then, as if something had snapped in the air, a shadow moved at the far end of the hallway. It was tall, towering almost, and it didn't walk like a human. It glided, its movements jerky, unnatural, like something not bound by the rules of this world. For a moment, Marcus thought it was a trick of the light. But no, the figure was real, and it was staring directly at him. Marcus couldn't move. His legs were frozen, his body locked in place. The figure grew closer, and with every passing second, the cold in the air became more oppressive. The shadows around him deepened, twisting into unnatural shapes, as if they were alive, as if the darkness itself was swallowing him whole. Then, just as the figure was within arm's reach, it vanished. The air returned to normal, and the cold lifted. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that the creature, whatever it was, had never truly left. It was still there, lingering in the darkness, watching him. For the rest of his shift, Marcus couldn't escape the feeling that something was with him, just out of sight. And as he left the Pentagon that morning, the weight of what he had experienced hung heavy on his shoulders. He didn't tell anyone at first. How could he? But the next night, he spoke with the other guards. They all knew. They all understood. And they, too, had seen things they couldn't explain. After Marcus's encounter, the whispers around the Pentagon grew louder. Other guards began to share their own experiences, their own moments of terror in the shadowed hallways. They spoke of fleeting figures, whispers that never seemed to end, and cold drafts that appeared in the middle of the summer heat. But it wasn't just the guards. Even the highest-ranking officers began to report strange occurrences during their late-night shifts. Doors that shouldn't have opened, lights that flickered without reason, and unsettling feelings of being watched, even when no one was around. Every night, these whispers grew louder, more distinct, and the figure, the one Marcus had seen, started appearing more frequently. Some believed it was a ghost, a restless spirit, perhaps one of the soldiers who had worked within the Pentagon during the wars. Others speculated that it was something far more mysterious, something far older, perhaps linked to the very land on which the Pentagon was built. Theories about the building's strange occurrences began to surface. Some suggested that the Pentagon was built on ancient cursed land, an area once sacred to tribes long before the United States was founded. Others believed that the pressure of military secrets, the weight of the decisions made within those walls, had somehow created a rift between our world and another, allowing something to slip through. But the more the story spread, the more one thing became clear. The Pentagon wasn't just a building. It was a conduit, a place where the boundary between the living and the dead, the known and the unknown, was thinner than anyone had ever realized. Could the Pentagon's history be linked to something far darker, A building that had seen wars, coups, assassinations, and betrayals. Could it hold the energy of those who had been lost in the wake of these tragedies? Could the very nature of secrecy, the weight of power and control, have awakened something long buried? The truth is still unclear, but the stories persist, and as long as the Pentagon stands, the whispers will continue. As the years have passed, the stories of strange occurrences at the Pentagon have never truly stopped. Guards, officers, and workers continue to walk its labyrinthine corridors, haunted by the whispers, the shadows, and the lingering sense that something ancient, something unknown, has made its home within the very walls of this fortress of power. The footsteps continue to echo in empty hallways. The cold drafts creep through rooms that should be sealed, and the whispers, ever present, refuse to be silenced. But the Pentagon, as vast as it is a place built on secrecy, and its darkest truths remain locked away, hidden from those who seek to understand. For John, Marcus, and countless others who have worked inside this building, the question is no longer what they have witnessed, but why. Why does the Pentagon continue to hold these dark secrets? Is it merely the weight of history, the echo of wars past, or is there something deeper, something buried in the very foundation of the building that refuses to remain forgotten? Perhaps it is the very nature of power itself, how it attracts darkness, how the weight of secrets and decisions made in the shadows has the ability to create something that lingers long after the people who made them are gone. Perhaps it is the fact that the Pentagon has been the site of so many decisions that have shaped the course of history, decisions that carry the weight of life and death, that has allowed the building itself to become a conduit to the unknown. But one thing is clear: the Pentagon is not just a building. It is a place where the lines between the living and the dead blur, where the forces of the past and present collide, and where the supernatural and the human struggle for control. No matter how many times the Pentagon is cleaned, renovated, or restructured, the whispers will continue. The footsteps will echo. The shadows will remain. Some secrets were never meant to be uncovered.